Hello and welcome everybody to this live
Hello.
stream. In today's interview, we'll be talking to a veterinarian who doesn't eat her patients. How brilliant is that? We're also going to be talking about how much the veterinary industry has been conditioned to save one while still eating the other, addressing what is behind the turkey shortage around Thanksgiving tables all around the country, and also the incredible work of herself, Dr. Crystal Heath, founder of Our Honor. So if you love animals, have ever thought about becoming a vet, or just looking for some interesting talking points around the table, stay tuned. Thank you so much for joining us today, Crystal.
Thank you so much for having me. And first off, we have to discuss the title of this episode. I saw the title on the email that you sent to a listserv that we're part of. And I was like, oh my God, I have to message them right away and change that. This title is absolutely not going to fly. It's super judgmental. You can't just tell people what to do. That's not how you make people go vegan. But then I'm like, this is actually a really, really great title because it's going to get so many clicks from a lot of angry people and really up the algorithm. And I already know what all the comments are going to be. There's going to be some really highbrow comments from people how dare she force her beliefs on us, and the whole bacon and the lions eat gazelles thing. But yeah, I mean, I am your classic Northern California person. This is the West Coast. This isn't the East Coast. This isn't New York, where we're known for being really assertive and opinionated. In Northern California, we are known for being super passive and passive aggressive even. So around here, we don't share our opinions to people on things. We don't say what we think. So this is kind of really scary title for me to just put out there. But so the title is Stop Eating Your Patients, right? With an exclamation point. And I see the YouTube title page, it says, don't eat your patients and all vets should be vegan, which is super judgmental. And even kind of a vegan stereotype, right? They're just forcing your beliefs on you. But what are the barriers to making people vegan? It's not just taste, price, and convenience. It's cultural attachments. It seems natural to eat meat. There are social norms and social reinforcement that make it hard for people to change their habits. And behavior change, it spreads through networks, and not in the same way information spreads through networks. It starts sort of at the periphery and builds momentum to approach the center. And here I am, one of a growing group of veterinarians who are starting at the periphery and working towards the center of the veterinary profession to create behavior change within our profession. And this title is really polarizing, but it gets the clicks. So hey, and a lot of vegan vets really love the title, and hopefully that will empower them to help us build momentum. And it's kind of absurd too to think about the reaction to pushing veganism, right? It's if the title was stop throwing paper in the garbage and everyone should recycle, that doesn't warrant the same level
How
of
dare you? How dare you?
but people look sometimes they're oh my God, what if the recycling bin is too far away? Stop forcing your recycling agenda on me. How dare you? They just wouldn't happen. And a lot of the lectures that we got in vet school, you can see examples of this on YouTube, lectures from Temple Grandin. And every lecture, she says, I eat meat. And Dr. Frank Mitloehner is another one. He says in a lecture, I'm an omnivore. But if you say, I was on a TikTok and I said, I don't eat my patients. And some people jumped on me for saying that, said it sounded really judgmental. And one person said, I agree, we need to reform large animal medicine in general, but extreme views and condescending personalities like yours aren't going to do it. But I mean, I'll talk about some of the brutal practices of animal agriculture during this talk, I'm sure. And you have to ask yourself, who are the real extremists here? The ones who are defending these brutal practices, or the ones trying to change it? And throughout history, who were the extremists, the suffragettes, the abolitionists, those fighting for the right to marry. There's like kind of no doubt that we are on the right side of history. And one more story before I get off this tangent. One of the vegan veterinary students that I know wrote that in response to this talk and the title, she said, "I was feeling controversial, so I decided to mark myself as interested for my classmates to see." So it's really controversial in vet school right now to like say that you're going to this talk with this title. And I responded, you should always write a comment. I responded with, you could always write a comment that says, "Can't wait to see what this terrorist has to say. Gonna eat a big juicy steak while I watch this interview."
Oh,
Like,
of course, of course.
Making it okay if you really feel intimidated by what your classmates might say. And one last story too. One colleague of mine recently told me this story where he was at a veterinary conference with a veterinary student, and she ordered the vegan meal, and this older male veterinarian at the conference said, "Vegan, huh? Don't you know? Now you've lost all authority when it comes to pig medicine." And she instantly clapped back and said, "I don't eat dogs either. Does that mean I have no authority when it comes to dog medicine?" So anyway, sounds like this could be a career-ending talk for me, so I'm here for it.
Well, we are more than happy to facilitate in any way we can. But no, like,
Absolutely.
I really hope for everyone who has been triggered into watching this, you really enjoy and take the time to learn, because as you said, I think we're on the right side of this. And yeah, if you feel very judgmental about the idea of not eating your patients, well, who's judging you? Is it the title, or is it yourself judging yourself about it? So
yeah, perhaps it might be something just a little bit worth thinking about. And no matter what, Crystal, I'm sure that the animals, I'm 100% certain the animals are very thankful for your extreme and condescending views and your behavior that goes with it. But, as the title of this interview does suggest, there is something very strange about helping one animal and then going home to eat another. And sadly, the majority of veterinarians do just this. But it is all thanks to their personal and industry-driven conditioning to become speciesists. So for new followers of the channel, speciesism refers to our prejudice against animals in favor of humans or against non-pet animals. For examples, choosing pigs in favor of pet animals. Such as dogs, cats are companion animals. And we've all been subjected to conditioning around speciesism, often in our upbringing, our families, our culture, our social circles. And it takes time to unlearn that. And for you, Crystal, we understand that you grew up under the 4-H program in the US, which we have a similar kind of thing over here in New Zealand. And in total contrast to that, should I say, you've gone on to be the amazing veterinarian and animal advocate that you are today. Could you share a little with our audience about how the 4-H program works and the early years in veterinary school taught you how to view animals?
Yeah, so 4-H, it's a youth development program, and its main purpose is kind of to teach children about agriculture. And it was used as a way to bring modern agriculture techniques to rural America. And it was formed in like 1912, and it's actually a federal government program that's administered through the land grant university system, which is basically, it gave indigenous land to these universities to study agriculture. So these new technologies and efficiencies came out of these universities, and they needed to disseminate this info to rural America that was kind of stuck in their ways. And what better way to do that than through children? So in 4-H, there are different projects, and most notable, 4-H is known for having kids buy baby animals and then raise them for the year and then show them at county fairs, and they win ribbons for how their animal turned out. And then they sell them at the auction for slaughter. And there's a lot of emphasis placed on record keeping and keeping track of your expenses and seeing how much profit you made at the end, et cetera. And so I grew up in rural Northern California. And on my street, everyone had a small farm with animals. And all of the kids in my neighborhood were in 4-H, and they raised goats and sheep and pigs and steers. And so there's a lot of social pressure to conform to that. And we were taught how in 4-H how animal rights activists were illogical and crazy. And I rode horses too, and I was told animal rights activists thought riding was abusive, and that at that time I didn't see it that way, and I liked riding, and I didn't want to lose that relationship with my horse. So I could understand how people, could easily be led to kind of have a hatred for animal rights activists when it's going to affect your way of life and the relationship that you have to animals. And so I was vice president of my 4-H club, and I raised goats in 4-H. Among other projects, I did horses and dog, and I also did the photography project, and I spun wool. And I learned that but the big thing was my goats. And I learned that if I bred my goats and if they had boys, there is really like no market for pet companion boy goats. And so I would have to send them to slaughter. And I didn't want to do that. Like, the reason I chose the dairy project is because it didn't involve killing animals, but it involved, being with animals, which I liked. And I really liked milking goats. It was really fun. I milked my neighbor's goats. It was fun bottle feeding the babies. And I kind of like wanted to pick out a fancy buck to breed my goat to. And I wanted to see what kind of babies my goat would produce, what they would look like. So I kind of like really understand at a deep level, like the pull to exploit animals for our own sort of hedonistic desires. But I was really questioning things too, because like the idea of killing a goat was just horrifying. But it's definitely an integral part of the dairy industry. You can't just do dairy without being involved in killing. But I'm not sure, like, really the origin of how I got vegetarianism into my head. I think my whole family were kind of like right there the whole time. We really loved animals. And I think there was, some PETA stuff that we got at some point, and I started really asking questions about these things. And at one point, I'm like, I'm not going to eat meat anymore. And I was like 10 years old. And I went to a birthday party, and they were serving hot dogs. And we told our parents, we told the parents there at the birthday party, we don't want to eat animals. And they made us peanut butter and jelly sandwiches. But when my mom heard that, she was like, you will eat whatever they give you. That's like incredibly rude to make them go out of their way to like do what you want. You don't ever do that again. And now, thankfully, my parents are vegan. And that's thanks to like Forks Over Knives and those sort of documentaries. But it's just ironic. If your kid, growing up in a rural area and you love animals, really the only outlet that you have for learning about them is 4-H. And we need to give animal loving kids kind of more options for learning about animals in a hands-on way. Because I'm really actually pretty scared that animal handling skills are going away. And I'm happy. I mean, there is this new LEAP program that's starting in my area that's kind of like a competitor to 4-H, where kids learn about animals on sanctuaries and things. And many kids kind of in 4-H dream of becoming veterinarians. So it's ironic that these kids who entered this because they loved animals became normalized to violence and slaughter and viewing animals as a means to obtain profit. So yeah, I mean, eventually I entered UC Davis, and I got my bachelor's degree in animal science, which basically teaches you all about animals from sort of a capitalist perspective, all about the science of exploiting animals and raising animals for food. So yeah, and then once I got into veterinary school, one of the first classes that we had the first semester was a lecture on animal welfare versus animal rights. And it basically told us that the veterinary profession is all about animal welfare. And animal rights is basically like a threat, because people could, if animals got rights, people could sue veterinarians for a loss of companionship, not just for the value of the patient, but it could result in like millions in lawsuits for loss of companionship, much like how human families sue doctors. And that would increase our malpractice insurance. And right now I pay like $400 a year for malpractice insurance, but human doctors pay tens of thousands of dollars per year. So obviously that would increase the cost of veterinary care for everyone. And that really scares veterinarians. But the answer isn't denying animals rights, right? It's to keep vet costs low. It's tort reform. So now, from studying these animal agriculture special interest groups, that these sorts of corporate talking points have been sort of fed to universities, and it keeps the discussion of animal rights at a very much a kindergarten level, where there's a lot of nuance and complexity when you actually dive into the discussion about this. But they very early set off the discussion as like a team's perspective of like, if you start advocating for animal rights, you are one of those radical extremists. Like, you can't, that conversation just isn't allowed. And so it never evolves past this very kindergarten understanding about what animal rights is. And they really, in school too, they highlight the very few cases of vandalism and violence committed by activists. And they pretty much ignore the death, the murders, the mortality, the public health threats, the suicides that result from the industry of animal exploitation. And when you're a young student, you don't really have like the mental energy to ponder other ideas than what you are being taught. And this social pressure from your classmates also keeps you from really raising your hand and going against what your instructor is telling you. So these backwards ideas are just then spread to the next generation of veterinarians. And we have to change that. So
well, I look forward to talking about this so much more through this interview and all the work you're doing to change that. And I'll be interested for our wonderful viewers here live with us today, if they have anything in their area like the 4-H. As Jackie said, we have
Calf Club here in New Zealand, which is not calves. It's just, it could be calves, baby sheep, lambs, goats. So if you live in a town and you have a companion animal, you would bring your cat or your dog. But in, normally, because so much of New Zealand is rural and farms, then kids are encouraged to purchase, or if they already live on a farm, then to choose a baby calf or goat or lamb and raise that and put, it's supposed to be a lesson in discipline as well, and commitment, showing how much love and care you can put into your animal, and you really bond with it. And then on the day, like you say, same as with 4-H, you win ribbons. And then at the end of it, so it's always been crazy to me, but we've been through it as well with my own children and everything back in the day. And they would put so much pride and care into these animals and learning as much as they could about them, and had this huge bond with them. And the animals, for about maybe, 3 months, 4 months, something like that, they would be inseparable. And then the day after all the ribbons are given out, for 99% of the animals are either sold, and that's a big incentive as well, because the kids get to make money from it, so it's like, you do a really good job, you'll make a lot of money, you can get your new Xbox game and all this. So every year it was like, oh wow, some extra money, for the kids, for my toys, for my games and all this, which is just terrible. And these animals are literally just put out to pasture, or they just don't have that human interaction again until they're slaughtered, basically. So they're either sold or just sent straight to slaughter. And it's so heartbreaking.
Yeah. And do kids around here too, there's a lot of tears at the end of, and there was this person who did this psychological study of 4-H kids and how they cope over time. Like the first year is really emotional. The next year, it's like a sign of maturity, caring less, which is a really damaging thing to teach kids.
Absolutely.
Here, love this and now kill it. It's just horrible. It's just horrible. And no wonder there's so many people who don't know how to deal with their emotions. I imagine for a lot of boys doing that, that's what helps build up that toxic masculinity of not expressing your feelings and being allowed to feel that emotion towards animals. I know even for me, I didn't have a program like that in Wales, but I was still taught to sort of hide that emotion that we feel for animals, hide that connection.
I remember having to lie to the kids, you know, to my own children about at the end of the calf club day where the animals were going. You know, we said that one of the lambs went to a sheep farm, you know, and every time we would go to a particular area of the country and he'd be like, oh, Chuckles is up there, isn't he? And we'd be like, yeah, he is. He's having a great time. You know, we shouldn't have to do that.
Oh, yeah.
That's why it's important we have these discussions and we're open and honest, you know. And yeah, so I'd love to hear from some of the audience if they have any experiences of this too. But yeah, I love what you said in, I think it was one of your TikToks or one of your social media posts about the whole thing of animals having rights and then being sued. I think you made the comparison to pediatricians. You know, if children have rights, you know, then you know, should children not have rights so that then they can't be sued pediatricians? You know, like I thought it was a great comparison. Yeah,
there's this group, Protect the Harvest, that did this whole like long blog post about veterinarians fighting for animal rights. And like they give me 3 paragraphs at the end. I'm like the nail in the coffin for their argument. They're basically like, if animals are given rights, we won't need veterinarians anymore. It's like, your premise is highly flawed because like obviously humans have rights, children have rights, and we still have pediatricians.
So true. That's a crazy argument.
Oh, but another thing I've heard you mention in a previous interview was about the importance of the general public learning and understanding the history of the veterinarian industry. I would love if you could share with us a little insight into how the vets we all know and love today, who are rescuing puppies and saving kittens, all come from this system designed purely to profit from animals, and how this is still being perpetuated now.
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, veterinary schools are founded at land grant universities. This is land taken from indigenous people. And these universities were set up to study agriculture. And then vet schools came out of these. So those who became veterinarians and founded the field did so because they raised animals for their own use and wanted to understand their biology more and help them when they got sick so that they could profit from them. And we needed that back then, but now we don't necessarily need to eat animals. And historically, the veterinary profession in the United States was a very white, male-dominated profession. And you look at class photos from the 1960s and 1970s, and it's all white men. And these are the people who facilitated the mechanization and the systematization of animal agriculture. The forget that the pig is an animal mentality, treat them like a machine. And this is described in an old National Hog Farmer magazine. And there's this great article Marina Blotnikova wrote about in the recent Current Affairs magazine, which I highly recommend everybody read. And so these people are the ones who facilitated this widespread use of things like gestation crates and pig farming, where mother pigs are confined to cages that are 2 foot by 7 foot, where they can't turn around, where they are kept for the duration of their pregnancies. I mean, we didn't even recognize that animals felt pain in the veterinary profession and do anything about it until the 80s. And they were the ones too who conflated the idea that productivity in animal is an indicator of animal welfare. And they gave us this dogma: as long as productivity is increasing, that means welfare is good, because only a happy animal will produce for us, right? It's bad business if animals are unhappy. And now we know that that's absolutely not true. And this is what I was taught in university too. It's bad business for animals to be unhappy. They wouldn't produce then. And they facilitated the genetic selection of animals to make animals who will produce more meat, milk, and eggs than nature ever intended. And they gave us the antibiotics and vaccines and pesticides that allowed us to pack more and more animals into smaller and smaller spaces. But now the vast majority of new graduates are women. And this generation really cares about animal suffering. They care about climate change and social justice and environmental justice. And we need to educate and empower them before they become normalized to violence against animals and before they're taught to vilify the concept of animal rights. So that's what I hope to do.
Can you just give me the name of the article again? I'll just try and link it in the comment
Oh,
there.
I forget what it's called, but if you Google, I'll link it in the chat later. But Marina Bolotnikova, which I know is an impossible last name to spell. It's Bolotnikova. And the magazine is Current Affairs. I'm sure if you Google current affairs and like pig farming or something, it'll come up.
We'll try and find that for you folks there in the comments.
Yes, we've had someone in the audience ask for a link to the article. It'd be great to see that as well.
Awesome.
Definitely.
But yeah, it's just I didn't know that about them believing in the the production and welfare thing. Like that's it just blows your mind, doesn't it? Like if you think of all the other struggles in history, the more that they abuse them, the more work they get done out of them a lot of the time. And so it's sort of how is it any different? It's just so terrible. And yeah, I can see people in the comments who are saying how it's just not natural. Like chickens is the great example of that with the egg laying. Was it something like 12 or 16 a year maybe is the natural sort of thing, and then they're producing hundreds. It's just terrible. But I'll try and find that link and link that in the comments.
It's so heartbreaking. It's interesting what you say about the indoctrination as well of more females coming into the veterinary industry as well. Because funnily enough, is one of our amazing animal activists, Shreya, Shreya from, and of course Shreya. Yeah, she helps you out, and she's a wonderful mentor for animal activism mentorship as well. And Shreya and I chat sometimes, and she was saying she was planning a trip to New Zealand, and she said, "Oh, you live over there. If I send you my itinerary for the planned trip, can you tell me, what you think?" And so I said, "Oh, sure." So she sent it to me, and apart from all the bungee jumping and the helicopter rides and all of that cool stuff, there was actually a trip to a place in Southland where it's a farm that is completely run by women, and it's all about empowering women. Look at what we're doing; we can outperform the men and all of these agricultural things. And I'm kind of like, I said to Shreya, I didn't realize this was happening, and certainly I know I used to work in the dairy industry over here for a long time, and it just kills me now that how much as women we are encouraged and indoctrinated to exploiting other female species, their reproductive systems, their births, everything. So I think it's even more important now that your work, you can teach these women coming in to the veterinary industry, and just be mindful. We are the same. We're different, but we're the same.
And we can use our stories of fighting for rights and compare it to the fight for animal rights. I mean, tell the story of the suffragettes and all of that they went through.
Absolutely. But we could go and talk about that kind of stuff all day, just alone with the females' role in it. But during our research for this interview, I was horrified also to learn about practices such as terminal surgeries. Being part of veterinarian training in many places. To further help our audience understand the current nature of the industry, could you explain what this practice is and what it's used for?
Yeah, so there's a whole history to this, and I go into it on my TikTok channel too, so check that out. But Dr. Bernard Rowland, who taught veterinary ethics at Colorado State, talks about the history of this whole thing in his book, Veterinary Ethics. And in order to teach veterinary students, they used to have these colonies of dogs that they purchased and bred, and they would do things like inject them with a toxin so that students could watch them go through all stages of anaphylaxis and eventually die. And they used to exsanguinate them and bleed them out. And so students could see what that looked like. And Dr. Rowland also talks about when he first became a professor, he saw this one professor doing this thing where students were forced to feed cats cream and then operate on them using only ketamine, and the cats would writhe in pain. And the whole purpose of the lab was just to look at the intestinal villi and see how the cream worked its way through. Kind of a pointless lab. And he's like, "Why are you doing this?" And he said, "Well, students need to learn to be tough. We have to weed out, the ones who are weak. This is a profession, for tough people." And he talks about another professor who said, you can't be a good veterinarian unless you've killed a dog. Just this mentality. And historically, like even before terminal surgeries were a thing, they did these serial survival surgeries, which in a way is even more horrifying. Students would do multiple surgeries on an animal in a period of several weeks. They would sew them back up each time and perform another surgery on them the next day. And in Bernard Rowland's book, he talked about a student who beat on a dog with a sledgehammer and then spent the semester repairing the damage. And this student received an A for this. And it's really interesting how when I talk about this and quote from Dr. Rowland's book, how my colleagues attack me for it. They claim that this would never happen. They ask me, like, what is the name of this student? Like, I have to prove that this actually happened. And I'm like, obviously I don't know their name. I'm literally quoting from a textbook that is used in a university, written by a professor at Colorado State. Why are you questioning this? And it's this big secret, I think, that no one is talking about. And no one ever expected that veterinarians would eventually speak publicly about it. So after students started to push back against having to do these serial survival studies and surgeries in vet school, the schools changed to terminal surgeries, where students would do one or more surgeries on an animal and then euthanize them before they ever even got a chance to wake up. And this was viewed as a better alternative. Of course, this devalues our patients' lives and it normalizes needless animal exploitation. And you don't learn how to deal with the anxiety of doing surgery on an animal who is expected to wake up and who will feel pain afterwards. And as a result, you kind of you don't learn good habits in your surgical technique if you don't even think that your patient's going to wake up. And you also don't think about who loves that patient and who is hoping that they'll have a good recovery. And you also aren't going to be as careful with anesthesia or sterile technique if they're not going to wake up anyway. And this just kind of instills bad habits right off from the get-go. And students miss out on the most important part of surgery, which is that post-anesthesia recovery, managing their pain afterwards and communicating with caretakers about how to care for the patient after surgery and what complications to look out for. And there's minimal time in veterinary school, and to just waste it practicing surgery on a patient who won't ever wake up is really pointless. But I thankfully never had to do terminal surgeries in vet school at UC Davis, although they do have, as part of the large animal track, I think you might have to, and there's an elective course where they do terminal surgeries, but I didn't have to. And what we did was we moved towards an access to care model where students learn surgery on animals who need it under the guidance of experienced surgeons. And we had a community surgery program where caretakers could get discounted surgery done by students, obviously under the guidance of an experienced surgeon. And I volunteered at my local shelter doing spay-neuter surgeries while I was in vet school. I was also able to do things like enucleations, which is an eyeball removal, and leg amputations, as that veterinarian there allowed me and saw my skills progress. So there's really no need for unnecessary survival surgeries or terminal surgeries. And sadly, I am finding out more, the more and more that I research this, is that there are still some things like these exsanguination labs going on in veterinary schools right now. Not students, but interns and residents, those who graduated vet schools and want to go on to do additional training, are still being forced to do this. But there are still core labs where students have to kill a patient in their surgical training. And students are pushing back against this. But unfortunately, in some of these schools that still do terminal surgeries, the only other option that the students are given is a dead animal to practice on, which really isn't the same. It's not the same as practicing surgery on a living animal for all the they don't get the post-anesthesia recovery experience and all of that. So, and they always say too that the first cut is always the hardest. So once you take part in something like that, you are kind of motivated to defend it as necessary. You don't want to have to like sit with the thought that you were complacent in something that was unethical. And this mindset creates a barrier to these open discussions and change. But I think the more we get people to talk about it, I think the more change is coming.
Exactly. And you certainly don't have to, listening to you, I mean, it's just horrific. And you don't have to be vegan. We're not that extreme. I don't think you have to be vegan to listen to what you've just been talking about and be like, hang on, that is crazy. That is not okay. That is hideous. That is barbaric. It's such a far cry from, when I think of all the people that dream of being a vet to save animals and then find out, you're required to do the exact opposite is,
well, thank you so much for sharing that. And like for me, doing the research for this interview, I heard some of that stuff before, but it still hits me just as hard hearing it a second time, a third time. And for someone like myself who's been doing a lot of research lately with vivisection, it's one of those things I feel like a lot of vivisection activists need to know about this as well and what's going on in veterinary school, because potentially maybe somewhere where there might be more leverage than trying to go up against the labs directly is trying to understand what's happening in this industry and potentially targeting it there. And thank you again for sharing it. It's very hard to hear, and for everyone at home, I'm sure they'll be feeling the same, but it's something we need to know. And being vegans, I think we often have to deal with this hard to hear information, but it means that we can act better for the animals. So I can see we even have folks in the comments here, Cora saying about emailing schools trying to find out what she had to do before getting stuck into this. And so leads perfectly into our next question about people wanting to pursue a career as veterinarians. We hear many accounts of people, they want to do this, but then when they find out these types of practices like terminal surgeries or even the lesser acts of these cruel practices, it stops that dream dead in the water because they don't want to be part of that. And so do students have the ability to study to become a veterinary doctor without having to engage in such things? Is there a way that they can say no to these practices and still get qualified?
Absolutely, I think so. And everybody asks, why aren't more vets vegan? Well, there's a lot of not only gatekeeping preventing vets who are vegan, animal rights activists, who have a history of animal rights activists from entering the profession, but there's also just self-selection. A lot of vegans choose not to once they find out about the profession. And vegans don't want to see animals suffering, and that's a big part of our job. But students definitely have more power than they think, and our group, Our Honor, is here to support them. And anyone who wants to create change does face a lot of emotional challenges. Obviously, you can try to seek out those schools that don't do terminal surgeries. Schools like, I know, Midwestern, Western, Tufts, UC Davis doesn't have a core terminal surgery program. I love my experience at UC Davis. So I highly recommend that school, even though there still are some problems. They actually recently would not let me give a lunch talk when a student reached out to me and asked me to give a lunch talk about ventilation shutdown, saying that I had a political agenda. But we'll fight that battle eventually. But it's really hard to question authority, like once you're in the system. But you just have to realize, we can make a huge difference, as scary as it is. Find friends who are like you, of similar mindset. And even if you can't, reach out to us. We have a community of vegan vet students who support each other, and we want to foster that community a little bit more. And we want to write to deans and write to schools and encourage them to make these positive changes for our profession, because it really does harm our profession's reputation as caring advocates for animals. And especially right now, there's a lot of talk in our profession about diversity, equity, and inclusion. And I don't know anybody from, different cultures and Eastern religions who, many religions don't believe in causing unnecessary harm to animals. And so they would be forced to not enter this profession because of some of these policies. So this is not very embracing of DEI to start with, not only just that and what it's doing to our patients too. But it's just not a very welcoming space when you're forcing students to do that and you're shutting down these conversations. I mean, it seems like schools are just kind of paying lip service to diversity, equity, and inclusion. If they really wanted to embrace it, they would look at all of the ways that our profession lacks inclusion, even in the food that we serve at vet schools and conferences. Any org that truly embraces it should embrace some things like the universal meal plan, one that serves food that is sensitive to all, and embraces all potential allergies and cultural traditions. And that is a plant-based diet. And I feel like really now is the time the time is like really ripe in the veterinary profession for disruption. And all of the like really great veterinarians who've developed brilliant careers, veterinarians like Dr. Andrew Knight, Ernie Ward, Dr. Julie Levy, all of these people fought back against what they were being taught in vet school and created positive change during their time in veterinary school. And I think that that's really important for students to realize. There's so much fear that, oh my God, I'm going to ruin my career. I'm going to be labeled a troublemaker. But really, you won't. You will be labeled, you will be an innovator in your fields. And I think that's important for them to realize.
Wow. Yeah. So please get to it, folks. Like I see quite a few people in the comments talking about their experiences. And yeah, it's just, you can be the change, and it's so important that we're there and we're making that happen. And so hat off to everyone getting stuck in and staying with it.
Absolutely. It sounds like the experience in vet school is quite similar to experiences over here in Animal Ag, when you get told all the time that, even when you feel like something is wrong, something doesn't feel right, something isn't comfortable, and you're seeing it for what it is, but it gets pushed down. You get told, oh yes, this is sad, but this is the way it has to be, just get over it kind of thing. So after a while you come to believe that, yeah, this is how it has to be. And it is so wonderful that you're out there proving that this isn't the case at all. But you've mentioned Our Honor, the amazing organization that you started, and through Our Honor you run a vet student support squad, should I say, and a vegan anti-bullying campaign to support pre-veterinary and veterinary students subjected to harassment due to their beliefs. Could you share? I couldn't believe that this was even needed, so I'm looking forward to hearing about this. But could you share with us a little about the violent speech often used in the industry and what your initiatives are up against?
Yeah, so just one example recently, a professor received an AVMA award, and they highlighted in this article about his award his contributions to making the veterinary profession more inclusive. And this man in particular is known for asking all of the vegan and vegetarian students in his class to stand up, and he proceeds to berate them in front of their classmates. And his Facebook is public, and you can go on there, and I'm not going to say his name or anything. It's loaded with anti-trans, homophobic, and racist sentiments. He is also like just crazy anti-student loan forgiveness, which is a huge thing that's discussed in the veterinary profession, because we all have hundreds of thousands of dollars in student loan debt. He shares these anti-vaccination memes and conspiracy theories. A lot of his posts are like blocked, on Facebook, saying like, this is misleading data or whatever. And here's some examples of the sorts of things that he says on his Facebook. He has one photo that's a meme of someone sort of sitting at an outreach table, the one, and it has a sign that says, saying I identify as is the same as saying I pretend to be. Change my mind. And he shared another meme that said, they want to remove the word mom and replace it with birthing people. We live in, no lie, the stupidest decade that has ever been since time. And I like, let this man like openly say what he believes, and let the AVMA give him his award. And we should all just decide for ourselves, what does that mean to us? I'd rather it be out in the open than like behind closed doors. And just another meme that he posted, it said, instead of electric cars, I think we should bring back the electric chair. It would solve more. So like, he's just like advocating. He's just like very, very angry man. And so, and this is kind of just the culture that we're dealing with. And when we were at the AVMA conference at the end of July, activists were protesting outside the AVMA conference, and because the AVMA's support of the mass killing of animals via heat stroke, which we'll talk about later, I'm sure. But Latina veterinarian Dr. Daniela Castillo held a sign saying why she was a vegan veterinarian and why veterinarians should condemn the killing of animals via heat stroke. And an older white male veterinarian shoved her from behind and yelled, "Get out of the way." And she is standing on a sidewalk with plenty of room around her. And she was assaulted. And a poultry veterinarian who is a professor at North Carolina State has this news website where he published this article that was just a hit piece against me ahead of the AVMA convention and really mischaracterizing our campaign and my role in it. And he called me a militant vegan with a streak of zealotry, and it pretty much insinuated that I was a violent person, that there might be threats of violence at the convention, which I am a very nonviolent person. I support nonviolent activism. So this is just an example of the kind of culture that we are dealing with here in the veterinary profession.
Wow. It's terrible to have, the people, the lecturers, the people at the top there with such bigoted, racist, so many ism views, it's...
Absolutely.
You put it in any other situation, you kind of like, how are they still there on those pedestals? But please, activists, let's make change. Let's make this place a brighter world, and we can do that. And I understand Our Honor also does a scholarship as well to help people get into this industry, so that we can have more compassionate change makers there. Did you want to share anything about that?
Yeah, we're going to relaunch it again, but the scholarship is basically tell your story about a time that you faced backlash or bullying, or tell us about something you want to see changed in the veterinary profession. Make a TikTok video about it and do the hashtag Our Honor Scholarship. And we will review all those videos and we'll give $1,000 scholarships to those videos who we deem worthy winners. So please take part of that. It might only take you 3 minutes. Maybe if you were really plan ahead of time, and wanted to make it really good, it'll take you like an hour, but definitely something worth doing. And it kind of helps to spread the word about these sorts of stories and about the change that the future generation sees. And hopefully more people will be able to see that and realize a lot of people are talking about these things and sort of see that this is the way the wind is blowing, and they shouldn't be scared to speak up about these things that need to be changed.
Yeah.
Absolutely. You yourself are very active on TikTok, I know. Are you able to share your handle briefly? So
I think I've linked in the comments already, but
excellent.
If you do want to do that again.
Crystal does great
It's
TikToks.
Dr. Crystal Heath or something like that.
I'll put it in the comments again, folks, just so that you can get to it. Because do you share the scholarship applications on there? Because I think the most recent one at the time of recording is one of those.
Yeah, I think we might update that. So I'll let you know when we relaunch that whole campaign.
Awesome. Yeah, well, stay tuned to Vegan FTA and make sure you are following our page as well. And then through our collaborative partnerships and stuff like that, we'll be sure to make sure folks know.
Definitely. I'm so glad for your organization, though, because it's hard enough being vegan when you need to find your tribe, but it's a lot easier, I'm sure, to find your tribe as a vegan than a vegan vet. That's a whole double downing on trying to find your tribe. So.
Yeah.
Niche within a niche. Yeah. But Our Honor is it's a fantastic organization. Once again, there's links in the comments coming up. But it's helping to bridge that gap between activists and veterinarians, something that I feel is critical for the evolution of how we care for animals. So what was it that actually led you to found this organization in the first place?
So I started getting involved in more animal advocacy when I moved to Berkeley. And this was mainly inspired by my friend Julie, who's been my friend since kindergarten. And she was leading the effort to ban fur in California. And I was really interested in legislation and legislative advocacy. And I joined the fur ban campaign and got more involved with Direct Action Everywhere, who was doing a lot of the grassroots mobilization for the fur ban. And I started sharing things on my Facebook page that were critical of animal agriculture. And my colleagues started to tell me I didn't know what I was talking about. And they would say straight up lies on social media and say things like baby cows aren't taken from their moms and farm animals aren't castrated without anesthesia. And they would say pigs are happy in gestation crates when research shows that 93% of them exhibit stereotypies and 50 to 75% of their waking time is spent doing the sham chewing stereotypy. And they would tell me that I needed to shadow livestock veterinarian. So I knew what I was talking about. And I mean, I grew up in a rural area. I was part of 4-H, an animal science major. I think I know what I'm talking about, but I was down to shadow livestock veterinarian. That sounded interesting. So on Facebook, there are all these private veterinary groups where we network and we discuss and share cases. And so I posted on there that I was looking to shadow a livestock veterinarian. And at the same time, I posted something publicly from Direct Action Everywhere. And it was a post that addressed the anti-Asian sentiment that was sweeping the world in light of the COVID-19 pandemic. And the post basically said, it's racist to blame the Chinese wet markets for COVID-19 when our factory farms here in the US pose the same risk. And all of a sudden, like there was this pile on from my colleagues, and they were sending me, like people were saying a lot of hateful things about me, like on this, in this private veterinary group, like, and I was trying to respond as fast as I could. And then all of a sudden, like the thread was shut down. I wasn't allowed to like respond to like the lies that they were saying. And I was removed from the Facebook group. And then my colleagues started sending me this meme that was going around that it had this like rainbow border, and it's pretty infamous. And it says, beware, Dr. Heath means nothing good for our profession. We recommend you block her. She is affiliated with the ALF and the ELF, which at the time I was not really knowledgeable about these groups. Like I had just joined Direct Action, and I wasn't really like, I don't even think I was a chapter member at that time. And I like really was brand new to like the whole animal advocacy scene. But I kind of knew that they had violent tendencies, which like definitely wasn't my vibe. And I was just kind of like doing this legislation thing and like sharing things on social media. And I'm like even to this day, I'm like a mild mannered, not really the type of person to participate in anything radical. And I found that I was blocked from all these veterinary Facebook groups, and I relied on these groups daily to share cases. And then later that year, someone had sent me FOIA documents that they had FOIA'd, and FOIA is Freedom of Information Act. And this document showed an email from Hannah Thompson Weeman, who was at the time the vice president of communications at the Animal Agriculture Alliance. And she's now the CEO of the Animal Agriculture Alliance. And this email showed how it just says how I am an activist with DXE posting on veterinary Facebook groups asking to meet with and shadow livestock veterinarians. And she says, we believe her intentions are to gather information she can use against the industry. We'd recommend spreading the word to your veterinary contacts in California using private member-only channels. So basically, they kind of initiated this smear campaign against me among my colleagues. And I think this is what led to this like pile-on that I experienced. And if you don't know, the Animal Ag Alliance is this nonprofit that advocates for animal agriculture. And on the board of this group are pharmaceutical companies like Zoetis and Merck, and companies like Smithfield and Cargill and others. And they monitor activism, and they only support veterinarians who act sort of as merchants of doubt for the industry. And they seek to discredit any of us who is raising awareness about kind of the harms of animal agriculture. And it's the same strategy that fossil fuel companies and the tobacco industry used, back in the day. And these FOIA documents also show how they monitor the social media of all activists, and they send this information to industry. And when I started a thread on social media about terminal surgeries, which is a completely different topic, and efforts to move away from terminal surgery, Hannah Thompson Weeman's husband, who's a veterinarian, he wrote and said, Crystal, I have this text is just amazing. I save it to my favorites. And at the time it was super, super scary for me, but now it's kind of like, it empowers me. He said, Crystal, your deranged activism here and throughout the agriculture industry is quite annoying. You've certainly earned yourself recognition. What irritates me most about you is you're a liar who make up stories. Additionally, you launch protests when you haven't even read the damn documents you claim to be protesting. And I think he's talking about the guidelines on depopulation, which we'll talk about. And he says, I have screenshots in your own words to prove it. You're bastardizing our profession through every available media method. You are the reason limited licensure should exist. Kudos to you, though. You're literally, by name, a topic of conversation in boardrooms from ag business to organized veterinary medicine across the nation. Your name is literally toxic. I'm sure this makes you feel great. And at the time, I was like, my career's over. Like, I'm done. Like, I'll never be able to get a job again. But that wasn't the case. And unfortunately, the admin of this group closed commenting. I was never able to respond to what he said. And this thread just left up there with like him being like the last comment. But my colleagues reached out to me and they started telling me how they had gone through the same thing and how this is a huge problem. And we joined together and we founded Our Honor, which is now a 501c3 nonprofit. And we talk about these issues and we support students and veterinarians who are fighting for change. And we put on presentations in schools and spread the word about sort of the corporate capture of our veterinary profession and the side of the story that isn't told. And we sort of talk about and we build community and we empower people to speak their conscience and organize to work for the best interests of our patients. So that's what we do, and that's how the whole thing got started.
Well, thank you so much for staying strong through that and carrying on.
A lot of support here in the comments.
Yeah, the comments said you rock. That is revolting. What was going on? You're a gem amongst the rough crystal. Oh, are you gem amongst the rough Crystal Heath? Yeah, it's so great to see everyone. I see Laura put about, I wish my name were toxic amongst the animal agriculture circle. So yeah, that is brilliant. And
I'm so sorry for everything that you've been through. That as Gareth said, it's just, kudos to you that, you've stayed so strong and continue to speak out when, you're up against so much adversity. And it's crazy, isn't it? Why, what is it that they have to hide? That they feel that they have to silence you and just block you from everywhere so that you can't get the truth out. It's like, what is so terrible? What do they have to hide when they're supposed to be so proud in supporting their work?
Yeah.
But it's I'm just so glad that you're speaking out and supporting others in your profession as well. But at the time of recording this, the work being done by Our Honor around ventilation shutdown is very timely. With the American holiday Thanksgiving right on the horizon, many will have heard reports about the shortage of turkeys this year, but it may not be common knowledge as to why and what really happened to these poor birds. As an outspoken advocate on the issue, would you care to give our audience a clear picture on what is happening here? And for those who don't know, what ventilation shutdown is?
Yeah, so I have some breaking news about this, which I'll first lay the groundwork for what this is about, but then I'll share the breaking news. But this year, more than 50 million birds have been killed in commercial facilities and backyard flocks throughout the United States, and more than 6 million of those were turkeys. So there's lots of news articles coming out about how it'll be harder to find turkey and the price of turkey is going to be higher, but nobody's really talking about why and what happened to the turkeys. And so it's all because of the avian influenza outbreak. And these facilities have tens of thousands and up to 5 million birds in one facility. And if just one bird tests positive, all of them have to be killed en masse to prevent the spread of avian flu. And also avian flu is like nearly 100% fatal. And so how do you go about the mass killing of that many birds? There's no good way to do this. And after the 2015 avian influenza outbreak, the American Veterinary Medical Association started working on guidelines to codify sort of workarounds for this. And they put together this panel of 60 experts, all sort of industry people, who worked on this document. And they list all of the species and all of the methods available to kill the animals in circumstances like disease outbreaks and emergency situations. And they have preferred methods, methods to be used in constrained circumstances only, and methods that are not recommended. And producers, unfortunately, have created, through factory farming, these very conditions that necessitate these sort of macabre workarounds for industry. And in this case, for birds, preferred methods include using cervical dislocation, which is basically wringing their necks one by one, or CO2 foam, which can be used in houses where birds are kind of cage-free birds. It doesn't work well with birds in stacked cages because the foam just settles down. Or you could do whole house gassing with CO2 in those cage systems, which death by CO2 is not great at all either. But methods to be used in constrained circumstances include ventilation shutdown plus, and this is where they seal up barns and they pump in heat, steam, and they watch for hours as the animals slowly suffer and die. And in some cases, it takes 8 hours or more for the birds to die. A certain percentage are still alive afterwards, and workers have to go in and wring their necks. So how did this come to be adopted? The ventilation shutdown in particular was a method that was put into the guidelines based on a study that was done at the Prestige Department of Poultry Science at North Carolina State. And Prestige Department of Poultry Science is named after Prestige Farms, which is a poultry and pork producer. And because of a grant by the U.S. Egg and Poultry Association of $100,000, they started doing these studies where they put birds in boxes and filled them with steam or CO2 to see how long it took them to die. And as a result of that, they put this in the guidelines. And the USDA uses these guidelines to set indemnity payments to pay producers back for the loss of their birds. So now we're discovering, though, that there's this push to make ventilation shutdown plus heat the preferred method of depopulation. And veterinarians are obviously horrified, and we're fighting back. And we've already asked the AVMA once to reclassify it as not recommended. The House of Delegates voted 99.1% to put the question back on the panel of depopulation, which only is scheduled to review the guidelines every 10 years. Luckily, though, because of our advocacy and everything, I think they're meeting in the interim to discuss this. But yeah, I mean, this is where we're at. And now the breaking news is we submitted another petition to the AVMA to ask them to reconsider it again, in light of the fact that the majority of birds, it seems, are being killed using heat stroke instead of other methods. And so we submitted this petition. We dotted all our I's and crossed all our T's. The AVMA killed our petition, basically saying that it was inappropriate to call it heat stroke, death by heat stroke, even though that's what it says in the science when you're discussing ventilation shutdown. They had some problems with the way we said in the interim. We wanted them to reclassify it as not recommended in the interim until they got more data to review the guidelines. So it was just very bureaucratic, raking us through the procedural coals. They spent 2 weeks kind of trying to figure out a way to kill this thing. So we tried to be nice. Now we'll see what'll happen next.
Yeah. Well, for all of our folks watching this, hopefully they will be supporting, and we'll get to how they can be supporting you in a second. But
insanity and injustice just doesn't stop this morning, does it? It's
no.
what the hell?
Welcome to Vegan FDA, folks.
He's animal loving, yeah.
But it's my understand. I think for anybody who's been watching this interview so far, they'll get exactly where this is coming from. But the endorsement of this method, to kill en masse, is from that industry lobbying. And I remember reading the newsletter from you about, how the backing data is from, as they put it, friendly audiences. They actually spoke about that at a speech they were given. And so you now have a growing coalition of veterinarians who are demanding for the AVMA to reclassify all forms of ventilation shutdown as not recommended. So what is the actual effect of getting it reclassified on the industry? I understand the financials have a big part of it.
Yeah, so our main push to get the AVMA to reclassify it was because since the USDA looks to the AVMA guidelines to set indemnity payments, if it wasn't classified as a method to be used in constrained circumstances and reclassified and not recommended, then these producers couldn't get taxpayer indemnity payments for killing their birds this way. And as an example of what these indemnity payments look like, we have billionaire Glenn Taylor. He owned Red and Brant Farms, and back in 2015, 5.3 million of his birds had to be killed because of avian influenza. And his farm is right underneath the Mississippi Flyway. And another article talks about how these wild birds are like dropping bombs of avian influenza onto these farms. And millions of birds are flying overhead of his farm, the Mississippi Flyway. And again, his farm was hit. And back in 2015, he got like $10 million. This billionaire got $10 million in taxpayer subsidies for killing his birds. And his farm's hit again. So he'll get even more millions. And he used ventilation shutdown as one of the methods used to kill his birds. And it's really sad too, if the people who are getting these indemnity payments are usually the wealthy. A lot of these producers, they own the birds, but who takes care of the birds and feeds them and houses them and pays for workers are the farmers and the people who own the land. And they usually aren't very wealthy. But when the birds get sick and have to be killed, the ones who get the indemnity payments are those wealthy producers who actually own the birds, which is really not fair. So, but there is sadly like this push by the ag secretaries in Maryland, Delaware, North Carolina, and they're pushing to make make ventilation shutdown a preferred form of depopulation. So that could be the battle. And they're doing this so that they don't have to fill out paperwork because they have to fill out extra paperwork to give reasons why they couldn't use these preferred methods to kill their birds and why they had to resort to killing them via heat stroke. And in this report, it says the cost of CO2 is a concern. I think it costs several $1,000s a load of CO2, and it's much cheaper just to rent a steam producer, the heater, and hook it up to your barn and wait until the birds die. And interestingly, that article you're referencing at the Animal Mortality Management Conference in North Carolina in June of this year, the head of the AVMA Welfare Division was presenting. And this audience was a lot of industry people. And this AVMA representative, she is the administrator of the Humane Endings Panel, which includes the panel on euthanasia, the panel on humane slaughter, and the panel on depopulation. And she's been telling the media that they are a scientific panel and don't take any lobbying on the guidelines from industry, activists, or politicians, only from their members. And I am a member of more than 10 years of the AVMA, as are the hundreds of veterinarians who signed on asking the AVMA to reclassify ventilation shutdown. But in this conference, at the end of her talk, she says, and I quote, and this is a webinar and was recorded, so people went back and reviewed what she said several times and wrote down her quote exactly. She says, "One item I would like to place some emphasis on for this room, since I feel you are a little more friendly of an audience than I've had the opportunity to present for over the past couple of years, is we need data from you. And I know we've seen some presented here, even if it's not published, if it's a case report, if it's proprietary data, if it's unpublished data, the panel needs it. some of these methods are at risk of leaving the guidelines. And I think you probably have an idea of what those methods might be. We need data to support leaving them in, to support them staying in the document. So what kind of scientific panel starts with the conclusion that a method should be left in the guidelines and then seeks data from biased sources to legitimize that method being left in? And it's just, there is this humane ending symposium at the end of January in Chicago, and my colleague published a review article on depopulation, and she submitted an abstract to present at the symposium, and she was refused. She was not allowed to present her abstract. And it would just seem like there's this clear pattern here that the AVMA is cherry picking data and who is allowed to be put into positions of influence. And they're just setting this up to ensure that those who exploit animals for profit are protected.
Yeah. Well, that's what we need.
It seems the more that you truly love and care for animals and want to help them, the more silenced you are. It's
Yeah.
Well, that's why we need more of our folks getting in there. And if you are truly passionate about the animals, become part of this profession so we can upturn some of this, because we can't sort of do it on our own. So how can our audience here, participate in aiding this change, especially with ventilation shutdown right now? So I know before you said about the petition was stopped, but are there other ways that we can be supporting you in bringing an end to this, in this, well, to be honest, I'll just say industry corruption?
Yeah, we're ramping up our next campaign. I mean, if you are a veterinarian, like, join the AVMA, definitely. A lot of compassionate vets ended up leaving the AVMA, and that just leaves all the toxic people left, and none of us are there with a voice making change. So I say join the AVMA, come join us to help create change. They should thank me for the membership drive that I'm doing. Like, they recently passed like 100,000 members. And I think we need to get into these leadership positions. But if you're not a vet, we could really use some help starting our next campaign. And we need help with social media and outreach to students, to universities, help in drafting press releases and opinion pieces and making graphics. And if you are interested in volunteering for us on a regular basis, you can contact us by going to our website, ouronor.org, or you can email us at info@ouronor.org.
You can sign up for the free newsletter there as well, can't you, to become a subscriber of, to keep posted of all your campaigns, all the things that you would love some assistance with, and just help to raise awareness.
Yes, absolutely. Please help.
We will do our best. Hopefully we can help you get some more supporters your way today. But ventilation shutdown is just one of many examples of how veterinary guidelines are driven by the animal agriculture industry rather than a true concern for welfare. While listening to the brilliant interview that you did with our friends and partners at the Animal Activism Mentorship, I heard you speak about how this affects vets working with sanctuaries. It actually came as quite a shock to learn that some people are putting their careers actually at risk by giving care based on welfare rather than profitability. Could you elaborate on this?
Yeah, so actually I was, a few days ago, I went to the San Francisco Veterinary Medical Association meeting, and there were actually no vegan options at all on the menu when you RSVP'd. This is in San Francisco, and it was at a steak and seafood house. But anyway, like, I had to email them and tell them I was vegan. But I met this veterinarian, like, as soon as I walk into the door, like, she didn't even know who I was. And she's like, oh, hey, like, we just gravitated toward each other for some reason. Like, there's a serendipity. And I sat down, and she immediately was like, I'm an exotics veterinarian. And like, I'm like, oh, do you do like birds and stuff? Chickens? She's like, oh yeah. I'm like, oh, I got to get your contact info. And we immediately, she started talking about how hard it was, because a lot of the work she does around reproductive diseases in chickens, and how she can't get, how important the hormone implants are, which is completely illegal for veterinarians to use these hormone implants to stop their egg production, but it definitely increases their quality of life. And we can't use certain antibiotics in animals whose species are intended for food. Like, we could get in so much trouble. So we definitely like need to change this, because animals are suffering just because of the livestock industry, and the way that they've abused antibiotics in the past now makes it so we can't even treat our patients who will never ever enter the food chain at all. And I'm just kind of looking for more people like this. This might be a really good campaign to start to get going, because it affects so many animals. So we were kind of looking for more people who want to investigate this issue further and determine what approaches we need to take to change this. What are the regulations in place? What's the best way to change these things? So if you're interested in joining this cause too, like, please contact us.
Yeah. So yeah, please follow the links in the comments there, folks, to the website. Yeah, it's just so brilliant that you're advocating on this as well. And yeah, it came as a shock to me about the whole why they're stopping it. It's well, as Suli's saying, care versus profitability. Once again, that comes up. How do we make money? And I think recently we had a case where the Italian sanctuary. I'm not going to attempt the name because I can't quite remember it. And I'm just going to make a horrible mess of it. Do you remember?
Yes. With the pigs.
Yes, there's a pig sanctuary in Italy, which one of our amazing team, I think, is currently making a short documentary on. But they were at risk of having all the pigs on the sanctuary killed because of an industry mandate. I believe that it might be in a pig flu type thing over there. But they've managed to keep those pigs safe for now. And it was once again a case of the industry dictating what's going to happen to even the animals on the sanctuary. Was, as you say, they're never going to be eaten. They're never going to be consumed. So it shouldn't be a problem in treating those and leaving those. But it's crazy what's going on.
I'm wondering if now might be a good time. We've had several people in the chat asking, that they would love to have a vegan vet, and where can they find out? Is there some kind of list of vets that are vegan, or how do they find a vegan vet?
There'll probably be ammunition for the AVMA, wouldn't it?
Yeah, that would be like a good campaign. Like, if somebody wants to join us and help start that project of like making a list of vegan vets, and maybe you could like pick your state and pick your location and find us. That would be great. But right now there's only maybe a couple hundred of us across the United States and the world. So it's kind of hard, but I think compiling that list and putting vets on that list would be a great project for us to take on, but I can't do it alone. So
yeah, that would be wonderful, and such a resource. And maybe, when people when other vets see how many there are and whereabouts they are, it might inspire some more. I mean, even before I was vegan, I think I would have more than happily had a vegan vet, probably chosen a vegan vet, because vegan, when a vegan vet is not going to do a worse job for being more caring of looking after the animals that are so important.
I think it's another one of those things, like it's one of those stereotypes that we have of, like, even when you look at Buddhists, with the compassion and the caring and stuff, and you expect them to be vegetarian or, hopefully vegan, with that. And so there's that expectation that might be the case. But of course, there's a lot who aren't, and like vets, caring for animals, surely they're going to be vegetarian and vegan, no. So we need more change. And so it's fantastic, the advocacy work you're doing there. I'll jump ahead and steal Jackie's question just to sort of speak on another.
We should mention that Crystal has a practice though as well, don't you? Is in California, is that right?
Well, I'm kind of like, I had like a kind of my mobile practice, and I put that on hold. And I've been focusing more on doing advocacy work and also working in the shelters. So right now, like, I'm not really advertising my practice and kind of keeping to the patients that I care for right now, and spending more time doing advocacy work.
Yeah.
Fair enough too. Can't be everywhere all of the time.
Yeah. But there's another great learning resource coming up, which I believe starts in just a couple of days, which is the ethical journey of veterinary professionals and animal advocate. This is a series that we can all be watching. Could you tell us a little bit about it and where we can go and register for it?
Yeah, the first episode of the series will be hosted by vegan veterinarian Dr. Daniela Castillo, and she will be talking to Dr. Jennifer Conrad, who is another vegan vet. And Dr. Conrad founded the Paw Project, which is this movement to ban declawing. And we recently finally got the declaw ban through all the way through the assembly, massive support through the assembly, and it was killed by the California Veterinary Medical Association in the first committee in the Senate. It was super, super disturbing. And so she is going to be talking about kind of her journey, what it's like to be a vegan vet in the profession. And you can join us on Sunday at 6 p.m. Pacific time on November 20th. And you can RSVP at chat.ourhonor.org, or you could just join our discussion at discussions.ourhonor.org at 6 p.m. Pacific time on Sunday, the 20th. And subscribe to our newsletter and social media, and we'll keep you updated on what our upcoming talks are too.
Absolutely brilliant. Well, oh God, block that user. Okay, we've got the spammers finally coming right in the closing minutes. We've got the spammers
you've
appearing.
Had nothing but support, but we know where to find hot girls thanks to that person that just posted. But we won't worry about that. That's another interview.
Spanner right at the end there, but oh my God, this has been a fantastic talk, and I want to thank everyone who's been here throughout the talk. I've learned so much, despite doing all the research before. It's really opened my mind to what's going on here. It's very, very much a place we need to be advocating more passionately about it. As I say, I said earlier about vivisection activists, I think this is an area that we should be looking at more. And so, thank you so much for sharing everything that you had. I will try and just put a last link into the comments for that series, so people who want to continue learning on this issue can. But I will just ask, we've linked your TikTok. Is there anywhere else that we can follow you to keep up with your amazing advocacy, your rebellion, your everything that you do and speaking out?
Right now, like I do Twitter regularly, just under my own personal handle, Dr. Crystal Heath. So follow me on Twitter as long as Twitter is still a thing. I have my own personal Instagram and Facebook, and then you can join the Our Honor Twitter, the Our Honor Facebook, and the Our Honor Instagram. And then also Veterinarians Against Ventilation Shutdown has its own Twitter, has its own Instagram. So join us there. And then ourhonor.org, and Veterinarians Against Ventilation Shutdown's website is vavsd.org. So lots of places to find us.
Brilliant.
Wonderful. And your content is great. It's informative. I don't know how you find the time to do it all. It's just wonderful. But yes, please, Crystal, thank you so much. If anyone wants to support Crystal in her work, you're far from a lone voice, but I know that it can be pretty lonely out there for vegan vets. So I think, the more of us that can help, however we can, the better. And stop the silencing, huh?
Well, we will close this off for today. Thank you once again, everyone, for joining us. I have just tried to put the link into the comments. It has come out horribly, but please, if you go to the Our Honor website and also chat, it's
chat.ourhonor.org is to RSVP, or discussions.ourhonor.org.
Brilliant. So get to it, folks, and I hope you all enjoy the rest of your mornings, afternoons, evenings, wherever you are around the world. Thank you so much, Crystal, for joining us, and let's everyone get out there advocating and helping on this issue. So thank you, and we'll see you next time.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.